Hi everyone, my name is Trey. Back here with Anthony, our Chief Information and Security Officer. We are getting towards the end of our cybersecurity guidebook. I think this is chapter 6, chapter 7. And today we're covering the importance of data backups and how it can help you recover if you do have a security incident in your firm, or if you don't, just the importance of it. So, Anthony, take it away.
Sure thing. Thank you, Trey. So backups have been around forever. We've been doing them for a long time, but I think a lot of people may have been doing them wrong or currently doing them wrong and don't understand, the full need of backup. So there's a few reasons why every company needs backups of their data, right? The major reason everybody kind of knows is if there's a major security incident where someone exfiltrates, deletes, or encrypts your data, you need copies of those to be able to recover, right? That's always the big thing. But there's smaller things too, right? One of the bigger threats that people don't pay as much attention to because it's more rare is the insider threat. So you have a disgruntled employee who has some access to stuff and goes in and deletes a bunch of company or client or patient files, whatever it may be. So being able to have good backups to be able to recover from that, recover that data in that time frame. And then there's also just the day-to-day human error, right? I'm your accounting person. I'm cleaning up 10-year-old files and I accidentally delete all our invoices for last year during the cleanup, something like that, right? A lot of scenarios where people are moving too fast and accidentally delete things that they're not supposed to delete that they need. So having good recovery times and being able to recover from things like that as well too. That's where your backups would come in, something like that, right? And then just to make a couple of important points about backups, a couple of things you want with your backups, and a couple of things to understand about backups. So on the security side of things, you want multiple copies of your backups. You want one on site where, close to the data so you can have fast recovery. You want another one off site somewhere, geographically dispersed from wherever your physical locations are of your data. So the on site, again, if something happens, we can quickly recover there. If the on-site copy gets compromised for whatever reason, whether it's a natural disaster or a threat, cyber incident, it affects those as well too. We want to geographically disperse copies somewhere else in the country or in another country, or again, just a geographically dispersed data repository somewhere. So we have that fail-safe copy outside of our hot zone during a disaster. The other couple things just to ask your IT folks or make sure your IT folks are doing is we want to make sure that the backups are immutable. That means that once the backup is completed and it's copied somewhere, whether it's locally or geographically dispersed somewhere, that no changes can be made to those backups. So you can't inject things, malicious code or anything. Those backups, they can't be changed. They're copied somewhere. The only thing you do is restore them as is. You can't make any changes in that process. So that's important for cybersecurity. And then also encryption. We want to encrypt everything all the time. I mean, all phones are encrypted, all email traffic's encrypted by default nowadays. So it's important for your backups, when they're resting in both locations, that they're encrypted at rest. And then as you're transmitting the data from your live environment to your backup environment to your offsite environment, you want those transmissions to be encrypted as well. And then the last thing to think about more from the business owner, me as a business owner as well, perspective is recovery time objective and recovery point objectives, right? So those are the two things we kind of gauge on backup and recovery times. Recovery time objective, that means how long does it take me to get all my data back into production so that my users can use it and go back to work and service our clients, right? So the more data you have terabytes and terabytes and you keep things forever, right? The longer it's going to take for you to get all that restored and accessible to your user base.
And I would assume the more expensive as well, right? I'm assuming the more data you have.
Yeah. So with data, like in life, the more you have, the more it costs, right?
Yeah.
But the more data you have, there's some compounding costs, right? Because you're paying for the storage wherever you're using it from. You're paying for your backups wherever you're storing that, and you're also paying for your offsite backups, right? So that there's multiple layers of costs on there when you store more data than you really need. There's also higher liabilities when you store data that you don't need. Some regulatory stuff that your lawyers can talk you through. But generally speaking, the more data you have, the worse it is. That's bigger attack surface that you have, more data that can be compromised, more patient client files can be affected. So the least amount of data you have, kind of the better. It's going to cost less. You're going to have less liability, and your recovery times are going to be exponentially faster the less you have, right? So that's recovery time objective. And then the other thing to think about is your recovery point objective. So that's how much data I'm going to lose during a total loss incident, right? So say normally you do backups at least once a day, you offsite once a night. So say your backups run at 8 o'clock at night and lightning strikes at 7:30 and all your systems are lost. That means that you're going to lose basically 24 hours of data. So your recovery point is 24 hours if last night's backups worked correctly and were offsited correctly and everything went out without a hitch. So generally speaking, if you're doing it once a day, we usually say you have 40 hours. You need to be up to 48 hours of loss, because you kind of always plan for worst case scenario that if it happens right before today's backup and last night's backup had some issues and never recovered for whatever reason, then that's really 2 days of loss. So your recovery point objective on a once a day, every 24-hour backup would be 48 hours as your recovery point. So you need to be ready to lose 48 hours of production from your people. And then the other thing to think about too, that a lot of people don't always calculate when you're talking about recovery time and recovery points, is the rework that happens as well too, right? So if we lose 2 days of work and it takes us a day to get all that work back, and then it's going to take us 3 days, another 3 days to redo all the work that we lost in that 48 hours, right? So your recovery times, your recovery point, the full recovery is going to be basically twice as long as whatever recovery time and recovery points are. So that's something to take into account too. Is it's not just we're back to work. We have to do redo all the product that we lost for that 48 hours. So that's additional 48 hours of productivity and labor costs possibly that you have to account for. So to kind of recap, backups, have them offsite, somewhere geographically distant, immutable, encrypted everywhere, and understand what recovery times and recovery points are, and understand the shorter the recovery time, the shorter the recovery points, the more it's going to cost. And as Trey said as well, the more data you have, the more all of it costs at every layer, right? Storage, backups, offsites, they're all going to cost you the more you have. So have a good retention policy and clean up as much as you can.